If you're committed to a goal, if it's something that you really care about, looking at what you are missing, that is going to be motivating.
That's Dr. Ayelet Fishbach, behavioral scientist and best-selling author of Get It Done.
We also found that how you monitor progress will influence your level of aspiration. That means that if you're looking at what's missing, you will already think about the next step, the next role. Okay, what else can I do?
I'm Michael Mogul, founder and CEO of CRISP, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. CRISP started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. I sat down with Dr. Ayelet Fishbach to discuss the truth behind self-control and willpower, how our environments impact our behaviors, and how failures and setbacks can actually increase our motivation.
What it takes to be successful is knowing how to deal with the situations in which you are not successful. Okay, is knowing how to deal with the setbacks and the failures, and just being new at something, right? If you're successful, then the next thing is life or your boss is going to introduce a new challenge to you, something that you have never done before, and you might not be as successful. And those greedy people, those people that are willing to work hard and deal with these difficult situations, are the people that eventually will have it easy.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Ayelet Fishbach is a professor of behavioral science and marketing at the University of Chicago and an expert on motivation and decision-making. She's also the best-selling author of Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation. I began our conversation by asking Ayelet what inspired her to write this book.
The book started with me just realizing that I am losing my mind, that there is so much that is going on in the field of motivation science, that it's like a room full with the treasures, and it's a messy room, and it's easy to lose these treasures or lose sight on what's important. So I was just, I want to sit down and I'm going to organize what I know and what I've learned and what I think that I know and maybe I don't, and just had to write initially for my daughter who was studying med school at the time. So I just wrote for her and she commented, and then it became a book.
Obviously, there's a lot to goal setting, but really what's happening is you're driving behavior change, right? So what would you say are the essential ingredients when it comes to successful behavior change?
Successful behavioral change is not just goal setting. Okay? It's goal setting. It's monitoring the progress toward the goal. It's sustaining your motivation once you have set the goal. It's getting social support, multi-phase process. But the key is to understand that you change your behavior by changing the situation in which it occurs. Okay? And you change others by changing their situation. And you change yourself by changing your situation. And now, a trivial example is setting an alarm clock. Okay? You want to wake up in the morning. You set an alarm clock. When the alarm goes off, instead of a quiet room that allows you to sleep, you have a noisy room where it's impossible to be sleeping. Everybody knows that. That's intuitive. What sometimes we miss is that this is true for every level of changing our behavior. We change the situation or we change the framing of the situation. Okay, we might have moved certain foods from the house. We might set a target, and when we set a target, then anything below that target feels like a loss, which we really care deeply to avoid, in which case we change the framing of the situation. The key principle, and everything follows from that.
We were discussing this even before the we started recording in the sense of the importance of setting the right goals or choosing the right goals. I know you argue that you have to set goals that feel more like aspirations than like chores, and that powerful goals feel worth the price tag. What do you mean by that?
Goals should be goals and not chores. Goals should be exciting. They should identify where you want to be, not how hard you will have to work to get there. Okay, so a goal to have a job is better than a goal to apply for a job. It's more exciting to have a job than to apply for a job. Do goals are more exciting than do not goals. So a goal to do something is better. A goal to get in touch with some people, to work together on a project is better than if you set your goal as I am going to stay away from certain people or from certain activities in my life. The most important element in setting a goal that's not a chore is intrinsic goals, is setting a goal that feels right to do and not only to achieve. Intrinsic motivation is the feeling that you have what you do feels good at the moment, okay, or feels right at the moment, as opposed to first I will do it and then later I'll get some rewards. Our goals are often not 100% intrinsically motivated. We are going to work because we need to get our paycheck, and not only because it feels right and good to do our job, but the extent to which doing something feels right as we do that, the extent to which we are intrinsically motivated, we will stick to the goal. So this is the number one predictor of adherence to just about everything. And I can show more data, but this is already a long answer. So let me stop here.
I want to elaborate on that. You mentioned the differences between setting do goals versus do not goals, like approach versus avoidance. And I'm curious as to why. Like, so for example, I think in the book you talk about in sports, it's the difference between setting a goal to win versus a goal to not lose. Why is it important to set do goals?
There are a couple of reasons. One is that do not avoidance goals tend to bring to mind the thing that you're trying to avoid. And it was Dan Wagner, which all the way in the 90s asked people not to think about white birds. And guess what? Once you're being asked not to think about white birds, there is nothing else that you want to think about. Okay, it's like not thinking about your ex, okay, or not thinking about music that you're trying to get out of your head. When you're trying to do that, the act of checking yourself, am I pursuing this goal successfully, implies that you need to bring to mind the thing that you are trying to avoid. Avoiding certain foods, avoiding certain people, if you try to do that, you end up thinking about that. Other reason is psychological reactance. We tend to react. We tend to rebel when someone, including ourselves, tell us not to do something. When we were kids, when teacher or parent told us not to play with a certain toy, there was nothing else that we wanted to do more, right? We really wanted to play with that toy. As adults, you still see the same effect where once we identify that we don't want to do something, we really want to do that just because we told ourselves that we shouldn't. There was actually nice research by Chris Bryan showing that you can motivate people by reminding them that other people want them to do something. And the way that works is that he had adolescents and he told them that marketers want them to eat junk food. And learning that marketers want me to eat junk food led these adolescents to eat less junk food because they wanted to rebel. Okay, they didn't want to do what other people wanted them to do. I don't think that this is always the best strategy, but it illustrates the psychology of why when you're trying not to do something, it is hard. It is much harder than trying to do something instead.
When it comes to setting goals, you argue that it's important to set abstract goals, but not too abstract. So the example you gave is it's better to focus on a goal of improving your mental health than simply saying be happy, because it helps give you the next action of what to do. Where do you draw the line between too abstract versus just making sure that it still remains abstract?
You can do an exercise with yourself. Just ask some why questions. Okay? Like I want to, I want to go on a run this morning. Why? Because I want to meet my weekly goal of running a certain number of miles. Why? Okay, because maybe I want to keep in shape. Why? Because this is important for my mental health. Why? Well, because I want to be happy. But notice that when we got to be happy, then the connection to the action was not very clear. Like there are many ways in which I can be happy, and running doesn't seem quite related to it. When I think about what will make me mentally healthy, and in this case, maybe physically healthy, then running might seem more related to it. And so I would say ask these why questions until the how becomes too obscure, okay? Not very related to the goal. And then you went too far. You want to get to the abstract level, but the level that is still very clearly connected to action, that you can very easily say, and this is how I maintain my mental health, okay? Or this is how I pursue business success, okay? Or this is how I become a good leader.
And then what about the role in which, numerical targets, like quantifying our goals, plays on motivation? So if somebody were to say, I want to save money versus saying I'd like to save $10,000.
Numerical targets work, and they work to the extent that they motivate people to meet their target. You want to get the specific number. Paper published that looked at the distribution of marathon times in the US, and they had about 10 billion marathon runners. And what they found is that there are many more people that are finishing the marathon just below the target, okay, just at let's say 3 hours and 59 minutes, than just above the target, which would be 4 hours and 1 minute, because many marathon runners want to finish a marathon under 4 hours. What's going on here? Well, once you set your target as 4 hours or 3.5 hours or 4.5 hours, this is highly motivating. You really want to meet this number. You are willing to work hard so that you get to that target. And so saving 10,000 or any other number that you came up with is better than just saying, I'm going to do my best. But there is one caveat that we often care about the number more than about the goal, and that can be dangerous. In the past, caught my 10-year-old waving his hand in the air by the end of the day because he was trying to get his Fitbit to the number of steps that he thought he needed to reach that day. Well, waving your hand in the air is not going to actually get you the steps and help your physical health, as we all know. Companies sometimes encourage employees to engage in unethical or at least less ethical activities so that they can meet that target. And so I say that it's important that the target has a number. Okay, it could be how much, it could be by when. Okay, we need to finish it by the end of the month, okay, by the end of the week. But you also need to realize that the only purpose for setting these targets was to motivate yourself. And if now the target motivates you in the wrong way, then step back, reevaluate the goal, and maybe set a different target.
In the book, you discuss overly optimistic goals, and that many of us as leaders are altogether very ambitious and sometimes optimistic on what a goal is that we can achieve. But where do you draw the line between optimism and what's truly unrealistic, right? Because you could argue that there's organizations like SpaceX and so on that have to set very optimistic goals to make things happen. How do you know when a goal is too optimistic?
Goals are usually optimistic, okay? And they are usually slightly optimistic, and this is good, okay? Like you'll have to work harder than you intended in order to meet that specific target number. That also means that, if you said that you're going to finish your project by the end of the month and you finish it like a few days later, this is good. Like the goal still worked in the sense that it still motivated you to work hard. When we know that it's too ambitious, that it's too optimistic, that it's actually not the motivating optimism that led to setting the goal. It's pure planning fallacy. Okay, you just didn't think about everything else that you needed to do. When there is really no chance, okay, you set the target not realizing what is possible and what is not possible. People give up as a result. Okay. By the way, they either give up or that they find shortcuts. Okay, they will achieve the goal, but in the wrong way. A few years ago, Wells Fargo got in trouble. You may have remembered that they had these great initiatives that involved selling 8 financial products to every customer. And as it turned out, you really cannot do that unless you are selling customers products that they are unaware of and never sign up for. If you see that employees need to use these shortcuts, or that they're giving up, okay? That they are less motivated because they say, well, it's nice that you've set a target, but there is no way I'm getting there. Then you know that your target needs to be adjusted, and it's perfectly fine to adjust your target. Okay? These targets are not set in stone. We design them so that they will motivate action.
The topic of incentives and having the rewards that for your efforts that can motivate you to stick to your goals. When does having the right incentive structure make sense, and when does it not work?
Oh, there is so much work on incentives. There is work on incentives in economics, right? And behavioral economics. The field between psychology and economics has really looked at the influence of incentives. Psychologists have been interested in incentives, starting from the days when we were mainly studying animals running through the maze. Incentives work. Incentives often work best when they are uncertain. Intermittent reinforcement in the old psychological jargon, meaning if you only reward the behavior on some occasions and not always, if you work hard, you might get the bonus. You don't know whether you will get it and how much it's going to be. That keeps you working hard. It's also exciting when incentives are uncertain, and so there is a lot of work on how to make the incentives sufficiently uncertain, sufficiently unstable, so that people actually care about them, that they actually notice that there is a reward here that's different than the reward that I got before or what I anticipate to get in the future. There are all kind of tricks with incentives. For example, thinking about whether to incentivize the group or the individual and how to best structure that. We should also be aware that incentives can seriously backfire. In my book, I tell the story of the Hanoi massacre of rats. And this is when French colonists back at the beginning of the 20th century were trying to get rid of the rats running the streets of Hanoi by having a bounty program. So they paid 1 cent per dead rat. The result was that the residents of Hanoi started breeding rats so that they can kill them and claim the money. So, incentive system can be tricky.
That's a very good point. It's almost like when you're designing an incentive structure, you want to consider the potential shortcuts that could exist or how they could be, how the system could be gamed, right?
Absolutely. Okay, what is the easiest way to get the incentive here? This is probably going to be the way that people and animals will act.
When someone isn't sure that they're incentivizing the right behavior or the right outcomes, like what were some questions that you'd recommend that they ask themselves?
Okay, so we need to realize that the incentive is usually not the goal. Okay, it's a mini goal. The incentive is a thing that I add to my goal so that I know that I do well, that I'm motivating myself or motivating others. And so the real question is whether the incentive is leading to the behavior that we wanted to observe and the real goal that we wanted to achieve. Your goal at work is probably to produce good work, to do well, and to do something that you are proud of, and to have happy customers and happy colleagues, and you are being incentivized to do that, and the incentives are a signal that you're doing well. If you can get these incentives without doing well, okay, if you can, let me go for the extreme, you can steal the money instead of earning it, then the system is faulty.
It really seems like when you've got the incentive right, there's a quality metric versus just a quantity one, which is based on time output, right? So meaning that, say, you're leading a sales team, a poor incentive could be incentivizing activity. For example, number of calls made, in which case someone could abuse that and say, well, I'll just pick up the phone and dial numbers and hang up, versus incentivizing, let's say, the number of outcomes based upon those calls.
Yes. And so, we really make the distinction in motivation between the motivation to do something and to do it right. And often these go hand in hand. Okay, like if you run the 100-meter run, then doing it quickly and doing it right is the same thing. But often they don't converge. Doing your job quickly might not mean that you're doing it well. Okay, like doing it well might actually take more time. And so we really want to understand how incentives affect how much people do. Okay, how quickly they work, how much output there is, and whether they've done a good job with it. This is a high quality. Fortunately, with incentives, it's often easier to incentivize how much than how well. This is kind of trivial once we say it, but often the trick with incentive systems that you really want to incentivize a work well done.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask, I know you mentioned intrinsic motivation. I'm curious as to, because a lot of what we've been discussing, much of it's been extrinsic, but how does intrinsic motivation impact the likelihood of achieving our goals?
Intrinsic motivation predicts adherence to goals, and this is basically something that we see everywhere that we looked. Okay, we looked at New Year's resolutions, and then in the US, most people set New Year's resolutions. Most of the resolutions are related to health, so like eating healthily, exercising. Second most popular category is like professional and financial goals. Okay, do well at work, save more money, and so on. These are extrinsic goals. Okay, these are not goals that people set because they are excited about doing it, because it feels right. But the extent to which they are intrinsically motivating, people will pursue them. So the little that you feel excited about doing the thing that you've set to do, that will predict whether you will engage in that activity or that goal by the following November. Okay, so we go through the year and ask people a few times throughout the year whether they are still pursuing their goals. We looked at students studying in the library, what predicted how much time they spent on the materials were, how interesting they were in what they were studying. We looked at consumption of healthy food. We looked at exercising. What predicts whether people eat these foods and how long they stay in the gym and doing whatever they set to do is how much it feels good, how much the healthy food is tasty, how much the exercise is something that is fun for them to do. And so really, the extent to which the goal feels right as you're doing it, that will predict persistence. Do people know that? Well, unfortunately, not as much as they should. When we look at the goals that people set for themselves, they often don't give enough weight to intrinsic motivation. They often think about their future self as someone who's only going to do what's important for them and not what feels good at the moment. And this is a bit of lack of empathy to your future self.
One could argue that the goal in life should be to find a role for yourself that aligns with your values and intrinsic motivators, because I know you say intrinsic motivation is really a combination of innate motives, which you say are programmed at birth, and then learned motives, because a lot of everything extrinsic seems to require a lot of discipline, whereas intrinsic motivation is very much dependent on someone's engagement in everything they do.
Absolutely. Okay. Intrinsic motivation, that means that it feels right as you're doing it. Let me correct that. It often doesn't feel right immediately. Okay. So often you need some initiation. It's what I refer to as like feeling comfortable to feel uncomfortable, at least for a little bit. To give you an example, we recently ran a study with improvisation here with the Second City Improv Club in Chicago. And what we found is that when we invited people to feel uncomfortable, and these were beginners just starting their improv class, they're not professionals, okay, they're like me. When we told people just, do the exercise, do the improv, just feel uncomfortable, try to feel uncomfortable, then they were more willing to engage and they were more enthusiastic about coming back. And this is true for many things that we are doing for the first time. Okay, so you're trying to get into like a new area, you might not feel comfortable. You are learning a new topic. You are working on a project you've never worked before. Intrinsic motivation might be something that kicks in later. Okay, and so don't worry about starting something that doesn't quite feel right as you start it. Okay, it might take time. After a while, whether it feels right, whether it feels good is the predictor of whether you're going to persist.
What about just progress towards goals? Because in the book you mentioned the goal gradient effect, if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, the goal gradient refers to the increase in motivation as we are about to reach a goal. Okay, and so now when we look at promotion and loyalty programs, we see that many customers drop the program after one purchase. Very few drop the program when they are just one purchase away from receiving the reward. Okay? If they are very enthusiastic about making the last purchase, it will get them that reward. Students that drop out college, and this is about half of the students that start college, they usually do it in the first couple of years, not when they are about to get their college degree. The reason is that there is really more than you get with your last few steps than your first few steps. For all or nothing goals, now like your last purchase gets you a reward. Okay? Your first purchase gets you just a tiny part of a reward, and so motivation will increase over time. It's also interesting to note that even for goals that don't have this prize at the end, it's not all or nothing, or staying fit, okay, or being successful at work. The more people do it, the more they feel committed, the more they feel that they can do it. There is an increase in motivation. And so the advice to just, do it, okay, and check with yourself how you feel after you've done it for a while is often correct.
It was interesting. So you mentioned that progress increases commitment, but also there's another side of this, that a lack of progress can actually increase motivation too. When does that happen?
Yeah, this is when things get complicated. And I wasn't sure that you wanted to go there, but here you went there. Yes. And so we know that with progress, people are more motivated, but we also know that people feel tired or licensed. Many of us, when we go to the gym, we try to find the closest parking to the entrance. In a way, we want to minimize the number of steps that we need to take as we are going to exercise, which is kind of funny because we are already doing like this mental accounting. Well, I'm going to exercise while I'm in the gym, so I should not be walking too much outside. Yes, sometimes when we feel that we walked hard, or in my gym example, when we anticipate that we will be working, we use it as an excuse to not work very hard. And this is when progress can decrease motivation. That means that how we monitor progress often matters. Okay? We find that for people that just start something, novices, okay, up to the midpoint, highlighting what you have done increases motivation. Above the midpoint, okay, or for experts, highlighting what is still missing increases motivation, because if you look at everything that you have done, you might feel that you have done enough and deserve a break.
You mentioned really the middle, which seems to be the danger zone. And this is where kind of a mix between when you have progress, like completed actions, and then lack of progress, which is really missed actions. Is the goal to be in the middle for as short as possible?
Absolutely, right? So we are motivated when we start something. We are motivated when we are about to finish. In the middle is when we lose sight of why we do what we do, and our motivation is on the decline. The solution, keep middle short, okay? An annual saving goal is too hard, okay? There is just too much time that is in the middle of the year. Maybe set a monthly saving goal, okay? A monthly exercise goal is probably too long, okay? A weekly exercise goal means that there is a short middle, there's a beginning and end, and just a few days that are in the middle, and that makes it easier for people. So, yeah, keep middle short.
And you also mentioned that how important our goals are determines how likely we are to be motivated by progress or the lack of it. What do you mean by important?
If you're committed to a goal, if it's something that you really care about, looking at what you are missing, looking ahead and say, I'm that far from where I want to be, that is going to be motivating. Not really sure that the goal is important, then looking back is going to motivate you. So, we ran a study with students who were either studying for a really important exam or an exam that wasn't really important. It was a pass-fail exam, and students didn't really think that they should study much for it. The important exam, when they were thinking about the materials that they have not yet covered, okay, what's still missing, that made them work hard. The unimportant exam, where it wasn't clear whether they should really be studying in the first place, well, when they thought about what they have already done, okay, the materials that they've already covered, that increased their motivation. So we really need to be thoughtful in how we we monitor progress. We also found that how you monitor progress will influence your level of aspiration. That means that if you're looking at what's missing, you will already think about the next step, the next role. Okay, what else can I do? We ran a study with an advertising company in Seoul, in South Korea, and we found that when we directed employees' attention to what they have not yet achieved, they were already planning about what they will do and how they will move to the next role at work. However, when we asked them to look back at what they've already achieved, they had lower level of aspiration, yet they were happier with their current role. They were more satisfied with the job that they have done and what they were currently doing. So how you monitor progress really matters.
And speaking of that, so when we're doing well and succeeding, it seems like positive reinforcement helps us keep that momentum. But when we fail, it seems like our ego gets bruised, and then we have this natural tendency to either tune out and or quit. I'm curious, how can we reframe negative feedback to use it as an effective means for making progress?
Negative feedback is hard to learn from. There is a reason why everybody tells us to learn from negative feedback, and the reason is that we are not very good at it. Negative feedback is hard to learn from because it hurts us emotionally and because it's just cognitively harder, okay? If you learn what's not, then by a process of elimination, you need to say, well, if that didn't work, then there is another way of doing that. That's not easy. Okay, there is a reason why if you ever train a pet, they say to only use positive reinforcement because now, when you punish your dog, the dog understands that what they did is wrong. They just have no clue what is the right behavior. Okay, doing this cognitive switch from if this is not true, then there's something else that is true. That's not easy. So, learning from failure is hard. It's not impossible. Okay, one way you can improve your chances is by recalling your commitment or your expertise. Giving advice to another person often forces people to think about what they have learned. Adopting a growth mindset, thinking about how you grow from failures. Keeping distance, okay, a third-party perspective. This is Ethan Cross's work on referring to yourself by your name. Okay, so asking myself, Ayelet, what went wrong? Ayelet, why did you mess it up? That helps keep a healthy distance and allow you to learn from failure. But it's not easy. It's much easier to learn from successes.
When you mentioned growth mindset, and I know Carol Dweck was one of the people that had endorsed your book, who wrote Growth Mindset. I'm curious as to the mindset towards negative feedback. I know the two you describe as either low commitment or lack of progress, and the mindset that we essentially have on our negative feedback really is the differentiator between whether we're seeing it as a lack of progress or a failure as a motivation to work harder.
Carol's work is really fundamental here. Carol Dweck was looking at education. What she found over the years is that when students get bad feedback, bad grades, okay, or negative feedback, they can either take it as a sign that they are failure, okay, that this is not for them, that I guess I'm not a math person, whatever that means, because probably doesn't mean anything. Or they can take it as a sign that there is a place to grow here, okay, that there is something to learn. And if you teach students to have a growth mindset, if you teach anybody to adopt a growth mindset, then they're actually better able to learn from failure. And this is really something that is more intuitive for those of us who are highly committed, who feels like experts. If something doesn't work, then you might be even intrigued, like, how come that didn't work? Like, what went wrong here? Let me understand that. For people that are less committed, it is harder, and you really need to train them or train yourself to think in terms of growth mindset.
So it's interesting, like the more committed you are, the less likely you are to be undermined by negative feedback. The factor that really plays a role in commitment really to come back to the setting of the goals, right? Ensuring that you have the right goals that are goals that you would actually be committed to.
Absolutely. By the way, for any goal, even if you set the right goal, the more you do it, the more committed you are. Like it takes some time. Allow yourself to engage before you would experience the commitment.
So let's talk about that, because I think Angela Duckworth was one of the other people who had endorsed your book. She wrote Grit, and she talks about this concept because what you're arguing is also the fact that even goals may be challenging, even they may be discouraging, even if initially you may feel that the intrinsic motivation isn't there, stick with it. Because it seems like if you stick with it long enough, that's where you do start to find that intrinsic motivation and purpose and commitment and all these things that are necessary to have successful outcomes.
Yes, and I would love to talk about Angela Duckworth's work, because this is great. And also Angela and I co-authored a paper that looked at something along these lines. Okay, for, what does it take to be successful? And often what it takes to be successful is knowing how to deal with situations in which you are not successful. Okay, is knowing how to deal with the setbacks and the failures, and just being new at something, right? If you are successful, then the next thing is life or your boss is going to introduce a new challenge to you, something that you have never done before. And now you might not be as successful. And Angela Duckworth found is that those greedy people, those people that are willing to work hard, deal with these difficult situations, are the people that eventually will have it easy, okay? That will be able to find their passion and do things much more easily. In our joint paper, which was actually led by Lauren Squeeze-Winkler, we found that when people experience those setbacks and we encourage them to give advice to another person, they were able to stay motivated. And we looked at people that were unemployed, so they were looking for a job, or they reported that they are struggling saving money, or they were reported that they are too angry, so they were trying to control their emotions. We looked at overweight people by their own testimony, and at students. Every one of them, when they were struggling, well, I will not say everyone, because of course it's an experiment and, there is individual variance, but as a group, when strugglers gave advice to another struggler, they were more motivated than we chose the best advice we could find and gave it to them.
That's fascinating, because this kind of brings in the power of like community. And I want to talk about actually self-control, because I know this is an area of research that you're quite passionate about. What's the role of self-control when it comes to sticking with our goals? Like, how do we overcome ourselves?
Self-control is where I started my career. I'm very, very passionate about self-control. It was the topic of my PhD dissertation. Self-control kicks in when there are two things that we want to achieve, and we actually prioritize one over the other. It's a specific goal conflict in which there is one goal that we really want to adhere to, and another goal that is less important for us. Okay, so maybe I want to exercise more than I want to, stay on my sofa and rest. Or maybe I want to eat healthy food more than I want to eat unhealthy food. Or maybe I want to control my temper more than I want to express how I truly feel at the moment I feel it when these are negative emotions. So people have these two goals and they are in conflict. What it takes to be successful at self-control is first to identify that there is a problem, and then second, to battle the temptation, okay, to be able to overcome it. To give you an example for one strategy that helps people see that there is a problem, we can make many decisions together in a wide decision frame. When people, for example, thought about all the exceptional expenses that they will have this year, all the times that they will be going to a hotel room, okay, or, buy a champagne bottle, they were planning to spend less money than when they thought about just like one time. Okay, one time that I will go to a hotel room, one champagne that I will buy, or one gift to a friend. And that's research by Abby Sussman here, my colleague who studies consumer behavior. We find that even with unethical behaviors, okay, when you ask people, would you take office supply for personal use just once? Then most people say yes. And then would you do this 10 times this year? Most people say no. Okay, just thinking about multiple opportunities together helps people see, this behavior is actually not the way I want to act, okay, the way I want to see myself, if you will. Then the second challenge is to exercise self-control. And what we find is that when people are aware that they are going to have a temptation, they are better prepared. They are better mentally and often physically prepared to resist. So interventions such as reminding yourself that it's going to be a very tense situation, it's going to be very easy to lose your temper, or there are going to be lots of alcohol at the party, or you are going to be tired and wish to skip your daily exercise. All of these help you to exercise self-control at the moment so that you will not drink too much alcohol, not lose your temper, and exercise on that day when you don't quite feel like it.
So it seems like we're not very good, just as a whole, at self-control, right? And it really at willpower. I'm curious as to the relationship between willpower and then environment. So, for example, if somebody aims to eat healthy, are they better off, exercising, these practices of self-control or removing all unhealthy foods from their home?
I like that when I finished my speech on how to exercise self-control, you said, oh, that sounds hard. And you are right. It is hard to exercise self-control. And you're also right that, the way to change our behavior is to change the situation or the way we frame it. If there are no donuts in my office, it is much easier not to eat donuts. And if there are donuts in my office, removing certain tempting stimuli for my environment is often the way to go. Given that you cannot fully remove all temptations from your environment, then the way you think about these objects or activities also matter. Okay, if, for example, you told a friend that you are not going to touch these donuts, or if you made a rule that you don't eat donuts in the office, despite the fact that they might be there because someone else brought them to you, should still be able to resist, or at least has a better chance. It's hard. Donuts are good.
Yes. Well, and what I've seen, whether it's, donuts or, drinking or whatever it is, you see people and they're in situations that require this degree of self-control that they begin to negotiate with themselves, right? Like they're looking at the sweets and they're thinking, what if I just had one donut, right? And then one turns to two, it turns to five and beyond. I agree in the case that we can't completely remove ourselves from all environments. I imagine we have to socialize as human beings. But for someone who is really struggling with maintaining a certain habit or progress towards a goal, at what point do you say, hey, you've got to really control the environment of what's around you, the people around you, and approach it that way?
You should always start with the environment. It's the it's the easy way. Don't have certain things in your environment, or do have certain things in your environment. Let me give the example of working from home. Okay, back in the days when we all worked in the office, it was easy not to feel tempted to do my household chores when I was in the office. There was clear separation. And when I was at work, I was just working. And when I was at home, I was doing everything else. But then the situation has changed on us. Okay? And many people are working from home, at least part-time. And now you have to build all these self-control devices. Okay, now you need to say, well, when I sit in this room or in this space, I focused on work, and maybe I cannot quite work in my kitchen because there is just too much that is going on there. Before I mention all the foods that are there, that is distracting. And so, yes, you're right. In certain environments, that's easier, and we should design our environments so that there are fewer temptations there. But we should constantly adjust and constantly think that we can remove from the environment. We should be thoughtful about where we put ourselves so that it is easier to get things done there.
And what about juggling multiple goals? So, for example, when somebody finds themselves in a situation where they almost have conflicting goals, let's say they're very career-driven and they want to really grow in their career, which requires a certain level of commitment and dedication, but then they also want to spend more time with their kids. How do you basically reconcile the two?
Yes. In a way, self-control is already juggling multiple goals, but self-control has this structure where there is self-control dilemma, has one goal that you want to achieve more than another goal, and the other goal is what we call temptation. When we juggle multiple goals, this is when we are looking to get some balance. Okay, we don't prioritize one thing over the other. Okay, we don't prioritize our family, let's say, or we don't prioritize our career. We want to find the right balance. Many times that is the situation that you'll find themselves at. And now we look at the strategies that allow them to best identify a way to pursue multiple goals at the same time. One thing that we looked at when we look at the activities that people choose is that often there is a preference for what we refer to as multi-final means or multi-final activities. And these are activities that help you achieve several goals simultaneously. Okay, it's what I refer to as feeding two birds with one stone. Okay, because I don't like killing birds. Commute to work by bike, so you both get to work and you get your exercise, or bringing your food from your lunch from home, so that it's both healthy and less expensive. You save the calories and the money at the same time, and so finding these activities, finding ways to do several things with one action is beneficial. It requires some designing, okay, some thoughtful plan. And it's in particular important when people have more demands on their life, okay, when you have, let's say, a busy career life. And as people age, when they have fewer resources, okay, often fewer physical resources. So you really need to be thoughtful about how to organize your life so that you pursue several goals with the same activity. The other structure that I would mention is when you have several activities that all serve the same goal. Okay, and we refer to this in motivation science as an equifinal structure, or all roads lead to Rome. In this structure, the advantage is that you have a plan B. Okay, if you can think about 4 ways in which you can exercise. Okay, you can go to the gym, you can run, you can do yoga at home, you can go on a walk with a friend. Then in a way, you only need one of them, or at least one of them in a day. But by the fact that you can generate several, you increase your commitment and you have a backup plan is helpful for people as they think about following through with these goals.
I want to talk about this, the short-term behaviors sometimes that sabotage our long-term goals. So you mentioned earlier when we first started speaking that we discount our futures, right? So this belief that our future is worth less because it's not happening right now. How does this play out just in the form of not just goal setting, but just in our behaviors as it relates to patience?
Patience requires that we forego something that is available sooner in order to get a better option later. With savings, it means that I will not use the money now, because if I keep it aside, then I will have more later. Or, with a pursuit of professional advancement, okay, I might take a class that will be hard now, but in the future, that means that I'm eligible for a better role, for a better job. Patience is hard because it requires giving up on the immediate outcome. And as humans, we want something immediately. Okay? We are present-oriented. If I can get something now, it is so much more valuable for me than if I can get it in the future. Okay, there is a reason why people are willing to pay more for things that are available now. Okay, why we pay more for a flight if we fly today, or for a theater ticket. Why we are paying for expedited delivery. We like to get things now, and patience goes against it. Where much of the work in motivation science is directed to helping people wait, okay, to helping people realize that it might be a better deal not to get the thing right now, because there is a better option later on.
It seems like the people we surround ourselves with, that seems to play a significant factor in our motivation to achieve goals. How is it important in terms of this community, role models, even anti-role models, as you mentioned?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. This is the part, the fourth part that is often neglected, okay? And again, like the naive perception that we have is that if something is important for us, we are just going to do it. I say naive because if the environment is not supportive, then I am very doubtful that we'll be able to do it. We pursue goals with others and in the presence of others. That is, many of our goals require a team effort. Okay, we do things with other people at work. We work with other family members. I would say that if something is really big and important, usually someone else is helping. We are not doing it by ourselves. And then we are pursuing many individual goals in the presence of others. Okay, whether you will be successful at your work, well, that might depend on your role models. Okay, the person that is working next to you. Whether you are able to stick to your health goals might depend on your family members, which are just there and watching you and either help you be accountable for your goals or discourage you. Designing the social support, finding your role model is really critical. I write about anti-role models also. Anti-role models are the people that we don't want to be like, that demonstrate the person that we do not want to be. And it's often helpful to know, like, I don't want to be like that person. I want to be like another person. Like, my colleague X is not the person I want to be. My colleague Y is the person I want to be. Your role models is usually someone who expresses the right values. Okay, so it's less about their behavior. It's more about what they believe in. Okay, that they actually chose to behave in a certain way, that they believe in certain values. And your best role model also wants you to be successful. And I give the example of watching athletes on television, which I don't think inspires anybody to exercise. The person in your life that wants you to exercise, okay, that wants you to be successful in like whatever you do, like in your profession, in your family life, in your health. This is the person that motivates you to act. This is your best role model.
Why is that? When we're watching, let's say, athletes on TV, that doesn't motivate us to exercise, is it because of a disconnect in saying that we are too far apart, we're nothing alike, versus somebody that you may know that perhaps you have more commonalities with or even similar upbringing?
Yeah, absolutely. So two things there, okay? One is that, they're too good, okay? It's like I look at them and say, well, I'm not like that. I will never be like that. Therefore, it becomes irrelevant. Okay, they do amazing things. Given that I cannot quite be there, why should I bother? The other element is that they're not part of our life. They don't want us to be successful. And it really matters that your role model is someone who wants you to be successful. Often it's someone that you know, but it doesn't need to be. Okay, like a good leader might be someone that you may have never met personally. Okay? It might be a political leader. It might be like a company leader that is just too far from you. And nevertheless, when you listen to them, they express a desire that you will do something better. And you get that. And you understand that they care about what you do and want you to be successful. And these are the people that might get you to exercise, not the athletes that's pursuing their own personal achievements.
And as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
Look at the situation in a new light, to see opportunities that I haven't seen before, to have a new take, a new way. My book was a game changer for me because it opened the door to so many new experiences and conversations that I didn't have before then, that I was very much, for many years, talking about motivation science only with fellow academics. And then I found myself in all these conversations that really smart people that don't study motivation. It was a total game changer.
I want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Ayelet Fishbach for taking the time to speak with us today. And I want to thank you, yes, you, for listening to this podcast and for your commitment to growing as a leader. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691 and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Dr. Ayelet Fishbach, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.